So welcome back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. It feels like I just left here. The Indianapolis 500 doesn't feel like it was that long ago, but we're here for a very different and yet very important reason. Right behind me, this is in the Chevy display, one of two cars that still exist from the very first Brickyard 400 back in 1994, and they're both here in the fan zone. Ironically, they're both Chevrolets, but this one obviously the most important one, the one I wanted to start off showing off. And that is the Jeff Gordon winner from the 1994 Brickyard 400, which really one of the most important races in NASCAR history. I think that's, I mean, not only NASCAR history, that might even be an undersell. American motorsports history, I think that's even a little bit more important. And certainly it's important that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and NASCAR have come together and put the Cup Series back on the oval track. I think that is, you know, while, and I said this on the NASCAR Weekly podcast, while I think that the road course race was a lot of fun, I thought it was a very pure race, especially last year's race. I really enjoyed last year's race, but we have to face facts, right? The oval is prestigious. The oval has nostalgia because we think of cars like that and drivers like Jeff Gordon. So I think everybody's excited. You know, who knows what the racing's product is going to look like. We're going to talk about that in this video because I had an opportunity to talk to some of the higher ups at Team Penske, including one driver who has a connection here, a lot of connections in fact, Austin Cindric. And of course, it wouldn't have been me if I didn't ask him if he was interested in the double, and his answer is a good one. We'll put it that way. But certainly a busy day today. Not only was I here on site at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway to cover the first day of Xfinity Series practice here at the Speedway, as well as the NASCAR Cup Series, I also got to sit in and join the IndyCar radio broadcast of the first practice session at the Ontario Honda Dealers Indy Toronto, or whatever they call that race now. But just wanted to give some quick thoughts on the Indy cars before we get back to the NASCAR stuff. Colton Herta was fastest overall in what was a disjointed session, which saw crashes from Linus Lundqvist as well as Alexander Rossi. Marcus Ericsson also suffered an engine issue, continuing his very difficult season of getting off to a good start during his practice sessions and certainly his race weekends. If you lose a practice session, if you crash a car, if you blow an engine, that's not helpful in any way. Back to NASCAR. Xfinity Series, while I'm going to update you on the third fastest driver today because I think it's interesting to viewers of this channel, and that is that Connor Daly, in a one-off effort for the Sam Hunt racing team, was third. And I'll tell you what, Connor Daly will burn this place down if he wins. The party's going to be absolutely legendary, that's for sure. So maybe a little bit of hype there. I also want to give a shout out to the Sieg Racing team. While apparently it's not an X-Pipe, it sounds like an X-Pipe, so I'm going to call it an X-Pipe. Their car sounds absolutely fantastic. In the NASCAR Cup Series, it was former road course winner here, though he hasn't won on the oval yet, Tyler Reddick, P1 in the 50-minute practice session today for 2311 Racing. Kyle Larson, other notables throughout the field. Kyle Larson was P6 in his return to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway for the first time since his Indy 500 attempt. Pocono winner Ryan Blaney was second. We spoke to his crew chief, Jonathan Hassler. You'll see that later on in this video. And former Indy 500 starter and 7-time NASCAR Cup Series champion Jimmy Johnson returns to the Speedway. His first day on the racetrack, 21st on the time charts out of 39 entered cars. So I mentioned Team Penske, and we had a really great opportunity to speak to a lot of the heavy hitters at Team Penske's, drivers, crew chiefs, technical directors. And that is exactly who Travis Geisler is. And because I had a technical director there, I wanted to ask, what are the challenges of the next-gen car, and how important is it to have real practice on a NASCAR Cup Series weekend?
You know, we were talking about prepping with Joey and Ryan about what we used to have here, and then you're talking to Harrison who's never even seen the oval. So, you know, it's a mixed bag, and there's a lot of drivers that haven't raced on this track yet. So I think having a little bit of practice to learn just the racetrack itself is important. As far as what we'll see next gen versus the old style car, I honestly don't think it's going to be dramatically different. I think our entry speeds and some of those things will be up because the braking is better. The car itself is able to drive into the corner deeper, wider tires, some of those things. So I think we'll see some better speeds. As far as the racing goes, this is definitely a tough place for us. I think we benefit from multi-groove tracks typically where you can move around. If you look at Pocono Turn 1 where you can kind of spread out, this one's going to take discipline and execution, pitch strategy, and qualifying. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to.
You mentioned putting a lot of load into the brakes. Is that an area of concern for this weekend to make sure that the brakes are managed throughout the entire race, or is that not a concern?
I don't think it's really an issue. This car has so much more brake potential than the old car, and with the old car, we were able to choose the brakes ourselves. So we would bring rotors that were really small, calipers that were small, kind of speedway style, because you don't use a ton of brake here. But we are in super lightweight brakes, so then it put them on edge. Now NASCAR kind of dictates what we're allowed to bring here, and I'll say they're huge overkill for this track. So concerns about durability, no. But as far as just, whenever you get your corner entry speeds figured out, that's where it matters.
3 cars here, 3 data points. How important is that versus some of the other teams who don't have as many cars?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the practice format, the way it is, promotes learning from each other if we can. And that's really our goal. Anytime we have this format where we're allowed to make changes to springs and bars and actually work on the cars, we need to make sure our guys are all communicating, and that's a big part of my job, is to make sure that each team knows what the other team's doing, what they felt with the change, can we apply it to the other cars. You have to be learning as fast as you can because it's still a relatively short practice session and you have to get your work done quick.
But it's definitely a lot more than you usually have. I mean, how important is that? How important is physical practice still to you guys? I mean,
it's so rare. You just don't get it very often anymore. So when you do, you really have to have a game plan. You can't squander the time that you have. So all the changes have already been previewed. The mechanics know exactly how to get through it, who's going to do what. The speed of that change is way faster than when we used to do cars. We practice every weekend, so we didn't have as organized of a game plan. Now it's pretty surgical and everybody knows what they're going to go do.
And of course I mentioned Ryan Blaney, victor at Pocono, second place on the time charts today. I spoke to his crew chief, Jonathan Hassler, about the similarities between Indianapolis and Pocono and also what this particular race here at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway is going to look like with the next-gen chassis. The big thing I think everybody's talking about, Austin kind of mentioned it, as a negative, but, the phrase track position race, right? I think everybody knows that most races are a track position race, but here at Indianapolis, it's a single group racetrack, difficult to make passes, so a lot of those passes take place in the pit sequence and the strategy. How much thought has gone into that for this weekend?
Yeah, that's, you mentioned it, that's for the most part the simplest and easiest way to pass. So yeah, it's like you said, in some respects it's no different than any other week with those opportunities kind of being important, but I think it's going to be really hard to pass on the track. We saw Pocono was pretty hard to pass on track, and I think this is just another step worse of it just being a little bit narrower.
And finally, I spoke to one Austin Cindric, former winner of the Daytona 500, so he performs well in Crown Jewel events. But more importantly, he has a ton of familial connections to this racetrack, and it goes beyond just what his last name is. And I asked him all of the questions that I'm sure you wanted to hear, at least in regards to Austin Cindric and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Austin, one of the great moments, I think, at the Speedway in recent years was after you won on the road course, singing Back Home Again in Indiana in the car. Your connection to this Speedway, I think a lot of people don't realize how, obviously you drive for the owner, right? Your dad, Tim, runs the team, but even your grandfather, Jim Truman, won this race in 1986 as an owner. Was this track the only track you were thinking of at the dinner table growing up?
I really think my earliest memories in racing really only involved the Speedway and watching races here. The first time I didn't go to an Indy 500 was the first year I raced the Coca-Cola 600. So if that tells you anything, this is racing to me. There's nothing other people might think of, the short track they grew up going to or whatever else. This is it for me. So it's very special to get to race here. It's a special place for really both sides of my family, and obviously a special place for my race team.
Describe how important it is for the sport for this race to be back on the oval.
I'm probably not the best person to ask, to be honest, because I haven't done too many Cup races on the oval. I haven't done any. So, but I think just listening to some of my peers, everyone's really excited to have this as a race, as a crown jewel race back on the schedule, and I know it'll be very cool for me to head the correct direction across the yard of bricks.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you. You know some people. Would you ever consider doing the double here?
Absolutely. I don't see a reason why not. I'm not in any rush to do it, but yeah, it's definitely. I have a love for that event. Yeah, I would love to find the right timing to do it.
And so that's day one here at the Brickyard. You may notice that I'm not holding a purple microphone. Well, you also might have noticed that I was doing a lot of handheld stuff today. Unfortunately, my mics, the Rode mics, finally bricked. I've had them for about 2 years. It was time to replace them. I guess thankfully it did it right before a summer break. So unless I can get to Best Buy, I'm going to have to, kind of appropriate for NASCAR weekend, be Ricky Bobby, and not really sure what to do with my hands. But hopefully the rabbit mic here, or the dead cat, whatever you want to call it, will be sufficient and give you guys good audio quality until I can bring back my Rode mic and my purple DL microphone that is so synonymous with this channel. So thank you guys so much for watching. More Brickyard coverage coming the rest of the weekend, and I also check in on the Honda Indy Toronto as well. Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.